So again, we're going to be focusing on the Color Picker app today, and the idea is to be able to run through the process of creating the Color Picker app. What the Color Picker app actually does is you have it's an app that has a number of switches and sliders, right? And then all it does is combines colors and outputs those colors. Essentially, that's what the app does. So you're going to see how that's built. We go step by step on how you build that. I've already made videos of steps. I've almost completed the videos for this particular steps, for the steps involved in creating the app. So you're going to be able to see that. I highly recommend that you have your laptop with you so you can follow through. But if you are not, please endeavor to make out time to go through. And the book also does an excellent job of giving you a step-to-step of how to do it. But I thought the video might be extra help to make sure that you follow all of that. Is there where I can mute? There's my mute button. Just a minute. Let me try to mute. You add his mom to this photo. She passed away before our wedding. Can you remove that stranger? She's looking at us. Uh-oh. Sorry. So, those videos will be available for us to go through. So previously, I was making mention of what two things that you need to pay attention to. There are several things that you need to pay attention to as we go through the tutorials. But one of those things is going to be, because what I'm going to do, I've already made the videos, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to be very heavy on explaining the rationale for a lot of things that you're going to see in that app. Because if you have a fundamental understanding of what's going on, it will help you get in a position where you are able to replicate the results and also go ahead to create your own apps. So first thing is the issue of, I talked about this, the IB outlet. You're going to see this come up repeatedly, and I'm going to show us as we go looking at this app, and you're going to see IB action. Those are really two important things that you're going to see. Like in the case of us trying to write a class, remember I talked about classes and structs. One of the things we did a lot of declaring the properties, first of all, and then methods. And properties are literally the features. You know, for example, for a dog, it has a name, it has a number of legs, it has a color, it's a type of breed. And like I mentioned, you could literally take a picture of the dog and tack it in there. The idea is to be able to model that dog. Whatever you see physically, you want to be able to drag all of that into the computer. So you're feeding the computer data. Now, beyond the properties, the next step is you also have the methods, which is what a thing does, right? The behavior of a thing. Methods are literally functions that are written to simulate the behavior of a thing. So, and usually what happens in the function is that data is taken from the properties, manipulated to give some kind of output. Now, a dog barks because certain properties in the dog can be played around with to create the ability to bark. So for a fish is able to swim because it has certain properties. All you do in method is access those properties, manipulate those properties, and then all of a sudden, the fish that swims physically is also swimming in your computer. So that's literally what's going on. So for the purposes of the application development we are doing today, first of all, think of IB outlets like your properties, right? It's like the interface builder outlet. That's literally what, it's almost like the properties. So think what I have here on the screen says it's a reference to an object or user interface component. So when we get to Xcode, you're going to be seeing where we create, for example, a switch. And then we're going to draw this arrow from the switch into your coding area, right? And once, which is more like your assistant editor, you're going to be drawing this arrow from the switch to the assistant editor, and then all of a sudden it deposits a code right there that's representative of the switch. And then it starts with arts IB outlet. And then when we want to simulate the behavior of the user interface, for example, the switch, we also go do the next thing. Oh my God, and I deleted that again, not the plan. So what is that? So, okay, just a minute. No, that's got to be hard, man. Minute. So once you're done with that, one other thing you're going to see is at some point we are going to go click the same user interface, for example, the switch or the slide, and then you're going to create the action, and then that action you create is literally the function, like the method that we talked about earlier. And that function is what you call to simulate the behavior of, say, the switch or whatever it is that you're trying to create. I don't know if there's any question, there's any confusion about that, but I'm just trying to draw on what we've done before in the past. But if you still don't understand, I would be happy to go back to review it. But if you have limited understanding, that's also fine, because as I begin to share my screen, you probably get to understand some more. So just a minute, let me shut this down, and then I'm going to start with this. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. So let me share a particular window. Just a moment. Another video in our series, and I want to attribute some of the content to. Okay, just give me a minute. The sound is probably. Let me just open the code and where's my code? Okay. Minutes. The Swift Exploration course book, Apple Swift Exploration course book, and we're going to be building an app. Before I tell us what kind of app we're going to build, I'd like you to first of all create a new Xcode project. So this is what, once you open your Xcode, you're going to have, welcome to Xcode. You can create a new Xcode project. Different offerings, multi-platform, Mac OS. But then the app that we're trying to what it. So, can you hear me? I hope you can hear me. So I'm just going to go ahead and walk us through the process. That sound wasn't as good as I thought it was. So first thing we do, right, is with this is once you open your Xcode, the application, right? You're going to click main, and once you click main, you're going to find yourself with this. The first thing you want to do is to create, um, just watch what you're going to create a view. In this case, I'm looking for UI view, right? You can literally type in view, right? Two ways you can do that. You can scroll down and look for view, or you can just type in UI view, and then your view would appear. UI view. That's your view right there. Now your view comes on, and then you slap in your view. One of the things you want to make sure is that you can use your guidelines, right, to be able to situate your view. But for some of you, depending on how your system is configured, right, in this case, the outline of of um, of the view is visible. In some cases, it's not visible. And then the next step, what I'm doing in that next step is to be able to show you how to toggle back and forth to make sure that that view becomes available. And you do that by going to the editor. You click the editor, scroll down to canvas, and then you click bound rectangles. Now I'm going to unclick it so that you see what's happening on the screen, because what you have is a white background there, right? This is what some of you would see. So I'm going to go back right now, and then I am going to try to create the bounds around the rectangle. So that's one of the things you have. After you've created that, the next way, that's a second way that you can do the same thing that we just did right now. That's what I was showing there. As you scroll down, you'll be able to see your bounds rectangle, which is somewhere here, right? That's your bounds rectangle. Yeah, I've scrolled past it, but that's the bounds rectangle. So what else do we have going on? So the next would be trying to create, just a moment, let me follow on and see what. So what you see going on next is actually you're trying to create like your assistant editor, right? So you go click editor, click assistant, and that's your code area. That's literally all it does there, to be able to show you the code area. After you've gotten your code area, I'm going to probably begin to stop and explain a few things here, right? Once you have that, one of the things you see is UI kit. It's part of the application, one of the things you could import. That's a whole different topic, but for now, just trust me, all you need to do is, allow that UI kit. It's part of something Apple has that is like a package, right? All you're doing is you're opening up that particular package. We'll come to that maybe in future classes. But simply a package. Just think of it like opening your Microsoft Windows. And then what you have after that is your class, and that class is named something, right? So this is you declaring your class, open and close brackets. So this bracket here opens and the other bracket closes. Now inside this particular class, you see a function definition, right? And then there is an override. And literally what's going to happen here is you're going to create, you are going to have properties, functions, and all of that. And then you're going to have these properties, and then you're going to have this function like what we already talked about. And that function, because it's within a class, we refer to it as a method. All right. But the override it has is that there are certain properties that are in what this you could actually refer to a superclass, and this is a subclass under the superclass. And there are certain things that you can, properties that might exist here that you can override here, right? That's why you actually have this whole override thing here. But just think of this in simple terms like your regular function or your method. So most of the functions you're going to create are going to be created within this class. So let me just go ahead and run. So first thing we're going to do is to watch what happens with that. Need faster. Okay, stop. Notice what happened there, right? I'm literally, so you click control, or rather you click the view, the view, which is the rectangular block that we talked about. I clicked it, and then control, and then you drag. Once you click control and you start dragging, you're going to see an arrow that begins to drag immediately. Now, from what I told us earlier, remember I was talking about the properties, right? That's what's happening here. Immediately you begin to drag that, all of a sudden, it's giving you an opportunity to give a name to the IB, whatchamacallit now, that I just mentioned, right? The property that you're going to have there. All it does is it literally gives you an opportunity to enter a name. But let me just enter a name for that, and then you're going to see how it ends. And that is called color view, COR, color view, and then connect. You click your connect. Yeah. So watch that. And that is your builder, right? An outlet. So you've created, think of this as creating a digital representation of that view, which is what you have here, right? So think of it like the properties that we've always talked about. You've been able to create that. And then notice this concentric circle, right? If you were to click this concentric circle, all of a sudden, it's going to take you, it will show, it will highlight this. If I click that concentric circle, it will highlight this rectangle, right? Showing that there is a connection between this rectangle and this line of code, right? So a lot of what you're going to be seeing is connections and connections and connections. And then beyond that, next thing that you're going to do is you go ahead here to, you've created the properties, you want to also create the functions. That's the next thing we do, which is creating the functions for this particular device. We've created the properties. Next, we want to create the functions. So if you watch the video, what I'm doing there is actually explaining each of this, what the override is, view DID load, right? That's all what you have there, and I encourage you to look at the video. I'll look at I've already uploaded it, and if you have like your PDF that I send all of the time, the link is literally there and you can get that. So once this is done, the next thing you want to do is literally go ahead and create the function, which is your IB action. IB action. That's the next step. So I'm going to stop this and proceed with. So let me also share the screen and go to my Windows. Developing Swift. So see what I was talking about. You see the color view. You click this and all of a sudden this highlights, and what it literally tells you, the concentric circle there, all it tells you is that this guy is connected to this, right? This guy is connected to this. So that's all it tells you. And then after that, notice we go ahead. Let me close this and probably stop the task and try to open a new Xcode. Let me try to run it from a new Xcode so that you can see what's going on here. Oops, just a minute. Close. So this will not close. Oh no. Colors by mixing your red, green, and blue. And this is where we got to in that particular video. First thing I was able to do there was to create this UI component and then to be able to drag and connect it to which is like the code area, right? So this actually maps exactly to the arts IB outlets, this property line. That's exactly what we did in that video, in the last video. So what I'm going to be focusing on right now is being able to make changes in this UI component. And those changes will typically happen here in this function called view did load. Now, one thing to understand about view did load is, first of all, it's a subclass. Some kind of subclass is a function, some kind of subclass under the larger class. This is the superclass. This is a class, superclass, UI viewer view controller. This is your superclass here. So it starts here. If you just look at the cursor as I click it, you see where it ends. So all of this is inside this superclass, and this is a subclass. So usually what happens when you load the app is that view did load, which is the subclass of this larger subclass, it's usually called when the superclass has loaded its view hierarchy into memory. So if you want to make any form of customization of the properties in the superclass, you can actually do it here, and that's why you have the override function. So, and that's why it's literally an initialization space where you can introduce different you can customize certain properties of things that are already in the superclass. So the changes we are going to make right now is literally to just change for this UI component to change the color from white, which is what it was, it was originally, to black. And to do that, I'm just going to type color view
and then it shows that up, and I would say color view dots background color, and the background color is actually what you use to make the changes of the background color. I now say equals to dots black, and it depends on if I want to make it dot blue, I go for dot blue. If I want to make it dot red, I go for dot red, whatever it is. But right now we want to go for dot black, and I click my tab, and that's it here. So I can literally run property is assessed. Okay, I can literally run this code right now, and we change. Yeah, waiting for it to run. Okay, yeah, we've changed this to white. So that's how this works. So we're going to keep making these videos as we build up in developing the app. So stay tuned, and again, most of the content.
So essentially, talking of the override that I mentioned before, the original color of your view was white, and all you're doing here is literally overriding that color, and all of those changes happen within your function, and that's the first step in the app that we build. So I'm going to go do a second part of um, the app, which is 3, which is your connections. Your connections. We're making the connections now. Let me do Windows. Just a minute. Browse the Windows 3 color picker. Stop. Are you sure this is?
To exactly what this is. This is a piece of code and a user interface, right? And the whole idea is we've just created a box here, and this is supposed to have the box on the screen, the iPhone screen, just pop up. Nothing special there. So once I build this, of course, the box I'm talking about, like some kind of black viewer box, shows up. But then let's go back to the code. So this is a property line, right? And you have a variable. This is a variable name. Now, it is the case that sometimes you want to change the variable name. There are two reasons why sometimes programmers want to change variable names. One of them might be because.
So this is a continuation of what we did the last time, where we literally just changed the color of the view. So in this video, what I'm actually doing here is literally to help. Sometimes there are situations where, for example, you have a variable like color view, and you're trying to change that variable. Now, if you just go change the variable directly, it might not work, right? So what I'm doing here is actually showing you 2 ways that you can change the variable very easily, right? And these are everything that I'm showing you here is actually in the textbook. It's just walking you through the process of doing it.
A more descriptive variable name that you think might be better and you want to replace it with what you already have, or because you have some spelling mistakes in the variable name that you already have and you want to make that correction. So ordinarily, one way to do that is to just dive into your code, and I've clicked color view. That's what I want to change, and you can see some kind of light highlight of color view here. So my first instinct is to make the change here and also make the change here and any other place where it occurs. So let's assume, for example, for the illustration purposes, that I want to change color view to color box, right? So box, I've made the changes. So next thing that's going to happen, I also want to make the changes in the view here. You see it's already giving me the error message. So I've made the changes here because so the changes have been made. But then I want to run this code. All of a sudden there is an error. It doesn't run properly as it should. And why doesn't it run properly as it should? Here's your debug window. You can go check out your debug window. But what we found with this debug window is you read through the line of code, it doesn't really tell you anything about why you are getting this error. And this is a pretty common error for a lot of folks that develop applications with Swift. So what you want to do is the goal of the video is literally to actually show you exactly what's happening, since it's a common error. So I want to go show my project navigator again, and then I'm going to scroll back in the arrow so that I get back to where I was before. So my first goal right now is to find the connections inspector, because this is actually a problem with the connections, or rather something that has to do with the interface builder. Because what happens when you're running these codes is usually you have the code here, and the code is pointing to, say, the viewer box, right? There's that connection between this and the code. And whenever you want to run your code, what happens is Swift begins to automatically look for those connections so that it pulls whatever you have here and displays it on that screen. And once that connection is severed, you automatically begin to get errors. So what we want to do in this particular case, because of the changes we've made and the errors we have seen, is to actually go look for a connections inspector. So you go click here so that we can see the inspector. So once we get to the inspector, this is what you have here. You want to come click here. This is how you get to the connections inspector. You click the connections inspector and you can see this is what's supposed to be. As you can see, it's being highlighted. I click over this. This is actually supposed to connect you to what you have on your screen. But then it's saying I have color view here, which is when you highlight this. But then for the code, the color view is gone. It's changed. So there's a disconnection between this and this because the system can't see this anymore. That's why it says the view controller does not have an outlet called color view. So this is your outlet. So an outlet called color view doesn't exist anymore. So the way to fix this is to click and remove the color view, right? And figure out a way to get your color box in sync with your screen. So which is literally making a color box matches with the color box, because color view exists here right now, but color view doesn't exist here, and that's why we're getting the error. So what we're going to do first is create that disconnect. We've disconnected it. So color view, so there's no connection between the user interface and your code line anymore. So to now create that connection, you want to go to color box and move to the circle that contains it here, and then draw that circle and make a connection with this. So you see immediately you made the connection. Now you have your color box and your color box. And now if you run your code, it's expected that everything should run okay. So That's what we have, and then it's all run okay. So, but that's one way to do it, which is come into your code, change the variable names everywhere you want to do it, and then go to your connections inspector and make the changes. But that's a two-step method. A more, a much easier method, to handle an issue like this will be to use the next step I'm going to show you now. So that step involves, first of all, clicking your control button and clicking on whatever your variable name is, right? So I click my color box here, and then notice what happens. It opens up this window, and then you click refactor, click rename, and then it takes you somewhere here. So the next thing you want to do here is you can rename, make the changes. Now I'm assuming that I'm changing back to color view, right? So I come in here, and you see as I'm changing, every other instance of color view is changing. We only have two of them here. So I can go to color view, and then I'll click rename, and that automatically renames everything. Now look at the connections inspector and see what's happening. Color view, color view. Remember, it was color box, color box. Now it's changed back to color view, color view. I can now run the code again, because it's just a one-step process, and boom, our build has been successful. So that's how you deal with this specific issue. Thank you again for watching. I'll see you in the next video.
Yeah, so all I literally illustrated right there was the process of changing a variable name. And there are two reasons why you want to change a variable name. Either you realize you've made a mistake with maybe spelling, or you've realized that you've thought of a more descriptive name. So making those changes, two methods. One of them is you make the changes in your code area, and then you go to your control section and then adjust the connections, or you simply use the other method where you control highlight whatever name you're trying to change. A window pops up, you go to refactor, and then refactor opens another window which gives you an opportunity to rename, and that's it. So that would be that. So in the next video, what we're going to be doing is, since we've created the view, and I've also created the IB outlet, which is akin to your properties in the class and the struct that I showed us when we were in the theory section. The next thing you want to do right now is to be able to create the functions that can, or before we even go to the functions, we want to be able to create a switch, right? After we've created the switch, then we can create, and as part of creating the switch, right, we're going to generate the switch. And when I talk about the switch now, I'm talking about the graphical user interface, right, or the UI component. And then after that, we're going to be able to create the IB outlet for it. So just a minute, let me get that to show the process.
Video in our series in the iOS app.
So I'm just going to move forward and go straight to
connection between want to do. We stopped with the code the last time we were talking, but notice I'm gonna hover over. You see how I hover over this concentric circle, and you can see this property, this specific property here, right? Is literally the under the hood connection to this. And the concentric circle here shows that there is a connection between this line of code and this UI component. So that's for IB outlets. Now I'm going to create a switch that can control what happens here. So it's introducing some kind of action, right, to this user interface, and that's where we go to create a switch. So I will start by clicking here and clicking switch, and then you drag the switch down here and try to align it horizontally and vertically at the middle. So we have that right now. So once you have that, the next thing you want to do, you can see it opens here. You can click all of this, but where you need to go click actually is here at the arrows, and you want to change this state. Right now the switch is turned on. You want to change it to off. So it's been turned off. You can see it's grayed out, right? So the next thing we want to do right now is to be able to create the IB action so that we can associate this user interface with some kind of action, so that we can now control what happens to this user interface through that piece of code. So and to do that, you just click on the interface control and then drag, see where you drag it to, and you drop here, and then it opens up a connection dialog box. Once it opens up the connection dialog box, now what you want to do is to type the name of that particular action, which is what we are trying to do, which is like changing the switch. So changing the switch, like turning it on and off. So we can say something like switch changed. So that's what we have. And then we want to change the type to UI switch, and then click connect, and that's how you have it here. All of a sudden you have this here. So what we want to do next is to type a piece of code that can make the user interface, which is the switch, do something. So one way we can do that is we can try to experiment with.
So just indulge me a little. Let me try to explain what's going on here. First of all, we created the switch, but then, like I mentioned to us, there are any number of things that you for every user interface, right? You're going to have something like IB action or IB outlet. If you want to describe the user interface, it's IB outlet. If you want to describe the behavior, it's IB action. But what we are trying to do here is we are creating this switch, and we are wanting this switch to control what happens in this view. So that's why you have the IB action. Eventually, you're going to, as we go to the subsequent videos, you're going to see that for every user component, right, you can actually create an outlet and an action. An outlet and an action. For every user interface, you can create an outlet and an action, which is you're creating the properties and the methods of that user interface. So I'm going to continue here so you see what happens next.
Where if we click the switch, right, the color in this user component or area changes. So to do that, we just type a piece of code that says color view dot background color equals to dot red. So if you run this line of code now, right, let's see what you're gonna see. It's built. Yep. So if we turn it on, all of a sudden it's red, but we turn it back, and then notice if we turn it back off, it doesn't change. And that makes sense because look at what's happening. here we have this function, and all we have told the function to do is anytime the switch is clicked, go red. So if you click it on, it goes red. If you click it off, it still goes red. So we have to figure out a way to tell, to now decide to tell the switch, no, that's not what we want to do. What we want to do is if I turn you on, you go maybe red, and then I turn you off, and then you go maybe black or any other color. And how do you do that? Or the way you do that is to use something like an if else statement. If this happens, do this, else do that. So that's why we're going to say remove this piece of code here, and let me say just a minute, remove this piece of code, and let's put in something else. And we're going to type in something else, and we're going to say if sender dot. So this is a method that is which is literally saying if the switch is on, do something, right? So we're going to say if it's on,
That's
let's
uh, that's more of a property rather, not a function, not a method.
so
Sorry.
type in this, right? Code view dot background. In other words, if it's on, turn to red. What if it's not on? Then we can say else, then open and close bracket again. Now we're going to tell it what to do. Instead of changing to red, we want you to go black, right? So we got this. So let's run it right now and see how the app behaves. So we turn it on, it's red. Turn it back, it's black. Turn it on, it's red. Turn it back, is black. Why is it behaving that way? Very simply, because we said if sender is on, do this. Else, in other words, if it's off, do go black. And that's how you're able to build that part of the code. So I hope you've been able to take out one or two things here. If you have any questions.
Right. So essentially, what we've been able to do right now, we've done a couple of things. One of those was create the viewer, and after creating the viewer, we were able to create like a digital representation of the viewer, which is your IB outlet, and we did that by clicking Control. Once you highlight the user interface or the viewer in this particular case, which is the UI component, right? You highlight it, you click Control, and you drag an arrow to a point where you want it to stay. Why do we specifically have it here and not elsewhere? Because remember, when we write those classes and structs, usually we put all of the properties at the top, and then under it's just putting it anywhere could possibly work, but then just for consistency, we want to put the properties up and then the functions down. So that's why within this, we have this, right? And then after that, everything from here down are just properties, functions. Notice that notice that from this point to this point is one function, from override to this curly brace is one function. From IB action down to this is also a second function. So all you have here is one property and two functions. What does this function do? All it does is it just changes the color of the background for the viewer. This second function, what does it do? It changes, it kind of helps you change the switch, or it determines what happens when you turn on the switch and you turn off the switch. and that's why it's arranged. So as we go into the next section right now, you're going to see, because what we're going to do next is to be able to create two other switches. And what's going to happen there? We're going to create, digitally represent them. In other words, model the switches. So what I'm going to do is, what we're going to do is model the switches and then create some kind of digital model of the switches. And how this is now connected to this is when you see the concentric circle, right? And if you go highlight the concentric circle, or you hover over the concentric circle, immediately it highlights whatever it's connected to on this end. So that's literally what's going on here. IB outlet and IB action. IB outlet maps to the properties. IB action maps to the function or the method. So I will close this and walk us through the next process, right? Where we try to create more switches. Okay, just a minute. Okay. So I'm gonna share this. No. Windows. So this is the fifth window. And by the way, like I mentioned, everything I've already uploaded if you want to go through it again.
This app development course using Swift. This window, and then we also created a switch. And then let me run the code right now so that you can see where we are with the code. See, this is what we've been able to achieve. We created a switch, and then we can turn that switch on and off. That's what we've done so far. So our next task in the project is to be able to create two additional switches so that we have three switches. And after creating these multiple switches, we're going to use actions and outlets, which is something I talked about in the previous videos. Two important things: actions and outlets to display the colors depending on the on or off status of each of the switches. So I'm going to start here by creating the switches. So we're going to start by creating the switches, add two additional switches. So instead of typically you would go here to the library to create the switches, but what we want to do is we want to simply duplicate this switch. So you click on that switch and Command D, and then you've duplicated it, and then you align it under the current switch, and then I want to another Command D, and then you have duplicated this too. Now I have three of these switches all lined up. So after creating the switches, the next thing we want to create is the outlets. In other words, creating the outlets is literally developing a connection between the physical UI components on the screen to the back end. This is where you have the back end where the code runs. So that's literally what you're doing. And to be able to do that, you just want to click each of them, click each, control, and then you drag, and then you drop here. So the first, we are going to call it the red switch. You make sure this is outlets, and then we click connect. And then that's been created. A line of code has been created. Let me kind of close this way so that it becomes so. A line of code has been created. So next, we're going to go to the second switch, control, and then you drag. And then that would be the green switch. And you connect. And then all of a sudden you have that. So let me fill this gap so that it will become obvious how they are connected. And then I'm going to go to the third, and I will say control drag, and then that's us, and we're going to have what we'll decide to call the blue switch. Connect. So let me move this around a little bit. Okay. So I'm keeping these three so you can see. This is literally you in each of the cases. This is the blue switch. You can see this, the connections, right? These are the connections for each of this. So you have all of this connected. The next thing we are going to do after getting all of the connections is show you how all of this is connected in the connections inspector. So you want to come to this side of the screen. Just a minute, I need to click on it first. Then, yeah. So you can see how value changed is connected to switch change. And I'm talking about switch change. Remember when we created this particular switch, right? We also connected it to this action. And I'm going to show you graphically what that means eventually. So when we copied this particular switch and duplicated it, right, a lot of the properties associated with this switch were also replicated. So pay attention to the referencing outlets, right? You can see the first says red switch is connected to the view controller. If I go click the second one, all of a sudden green switch, view controller. The third, blue switch, view controller. So that's how each of them is connected to the view controller. But then when you come here, you can see that the view controller that we just referenced right now is connected to each of these switches. That's what you can see here. So I can actually decide to disconnect one of them. Let's say I decide to disconnect. Let me just try to disconnect this. Right? You see what has happened? I have disconnected the first one. When I click this, it's completely disconnected from the action, no longer connected to the action. So one way I can reconnect it to the action is, you have the outlet and you have the action, is to literally control, click on it, control, and I can connect back to it. Right? And just a minute. This connect. Oops, sorry about that. I should have clicked control. I didn't do that. Sorry. Instead of going this way, you should actually go this way rather. It's getting used to. Yep, I have connected it back to this. So you can see it's been connected back right now. So if I click each of them, you can see the connections have been made. Remember, the mistake I made was trying to connect this to this. No, you're trying to because when you try to connect each of these switches to this, it creates a new, completely new connection. But this, remember, this action is connected to each of the three. 1, 2, 3. So you can see it's connected to all three of them. And in this case, what we have done, because we were trying to have all of respond to one action simultaneously. If we wanted each of them to respond to different actions, we would have created different actions for this. For in this case, everything is connected to one action. So when I try to run this, see what happens. Now this has worked. So I can go here and then I get this, but notice everything is red, right? And the reason why everything is red is the action that you have within this action is you're just saying if the sender is on, each of them, if it's on, if I click on here, it should change the color view or the background color to red. And if it's not on, which is else, then it has to be black, which underscores what I was talking about before. All of these three switches are connected to one action. To be able to alter all of those actions, one of the things we can do is literally write a new set of codes that would have us use one triggering action but make different changes to each of the switches. So I have a piece of code that I'm going to copy here and paste. So let's paste this here. So that's what we have here, right? And then one more change that we need to make is to, let me see, highlight this. So we're going to change what you have here. We're going to remove this, right? And we're going to put update color, right? Update color. And same thing, we're also going to do, this is another place where you have color view, where you change your color, background color. We're also going to change to update so that whatever is happening below in the code that we just put together is going to update in all of those. And what exactly is going on here? All we have done is to define each of the colors, CG floats for the color green and blue, and we're setting to 0. So we're saying if the red switch, there are 3 switch, the green switch and the blue switch, the red on, then it has to go to 1. Remember, the on off is false true on off. So if it is on, the red should show 1. And I'm going to talk some more about CGF float in Swift later. If green switch is on, you also have green equals to 1, which is true. If it is on, then blue is true. So, and then you say let color equals to UI color, and that's how you're defining and mapping each of them. And then you ask for a change in color. Remember, you are assigning this color, which you have defined above here, to it. So when I run this right now, this is what we get to see. So I change one color, it changes, this changes to a different color, and then you have all these color combinations going on. So if I go do this, there's a mixture of colors because both of the colors are showing up at the same time. A mixture of these 2 colors will give us this. So that's essentially what we've been able to do with this. So we use, the function update color, and then we call that function here, and we call that function here. And then all we've done is define the colors and then create conditions. It's purely an if statement. There's no else. If this happens, that's why I could actually toggle 2 of them and get a mixture of the results, because if it was if else, it will be either or, but in this case, it's actually a combination. Once this is on, it can show up, and then another one is on, it layers on top of that, and that's why you have the different colors appearing together, mixtures of colors. So I hope this clarifies this aspect of the lab. I will be talking some more about the succeeding portions of this lab later in future videos. Thank
Yeah. So essentially, as discussed in the video, the focus of this video was to be able to put together the three switches, and after putting together the three switches, we create digital representations of those switches, right? By control drag, and then you go drag and drop at the top, at the top of the class, which is literally like creating properties for each of them. But what you find here is that there is one action for three of the switches. So you created one action, and that one um, action, right, is switch changed. In other words, anytime and switch changed, it just shows the the method or the function right there. Just represents it allows you to make a call whenever you click on the switch to make a change. A call is made to that function, right? And then it executes. So for each of them, instead of having three different functions, we wanted all of them to do the same thing. And that's why we created it in such a way that they all responded to one action. And then with the kind of code we wrote there, we are able to make the distinctions for every one of them. In this particular case, all we did was define the properties of each of them. I'm going to talk about in the next video, we're actually going to talk about the CG float. And in fact, what the CG float is literally like your regular float. Your float is literally decimal in nature, right? But in the case of CG float, is a specific kind of float that is created specially for graphics, right? So think of it like, for those of you that know about color representation, where you can represent colors over a spectrum, right? From 0 to 225. Each of the numbers between 0 and 225 gives you a different shade of that color, right? CG floats, creates the opportunity for you to numerically represent colors. And that's what that CG float actually does. Is specifically designed for graphics by Apple. So I'm going to stop this and then play the next video where the focus would be on including sliders. Because what we have right now, the number of color combinations that we can have with these three switches is just going to be about 9 colors, right? As you toggle the colors. But what we want to do is introduce the slide. And what the slide does now is that it doesn't have to be on, off. You can actually slide, like I was talking about the digital representation of colors from 0 to 255. You can literally slide. It's no longer on or off. You can actually slide from, so on or off is 0 to 1, right? There's nothing like 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, none of that. But with a slider, you can actually simulate a situation where you can ramp up the heat of the color so that it goes from light to very sharp. And then with that, you can have hundreds of combinations of colors. So that's what the next video would actually focus on. So let me so what we are literally doing here is adding the sliders, and we can see how the sliders are added. So
in this video,
so just a minute, let me use the screen, right, the window rather.
as a part of a series on color picker, the development, and then you can change each of the colors, and then they are all binary. But I can also change this and add this and you mix the colors. So, but what's happening here is if we just do this, right, we have a very limited number of colors that we can actually create, which is probably somewhere around 9 colors. So, what we want to do right now is to introduce sliders so that instead of just having a combination of two or more colors, we can actually slide on a scale of say 0 to 1 for each of them and to do those kind of combinations. So that's what we're going to do now. And how we do that is by adding slides. So I'm going to start by grouping, sorry about that, grouping what we have, grouping and moving this to the side. So we've grouped and moved the switches to the side. And then what I want to do in order to create space, I'm going to select the top switch and I'm going to hold down the shift key and use the upper arrow to scroll up a little bit 4 times, right? And I do the same thing with my lower, click the lower switch, hold down the shift key and use your down arrow to scroll down 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. I want to think, yeah. So that's what we have here. So the idea is to be able to create enough space so that we can have our sliders and everything properly aligned in. So the next step right now would be to go to the object library and to get the slider and then place the slider beside the switches. So this the plus sign here is your where you get your objects library, and then we want to type in slider, and then we can drag our slider down here, right? Once you have your slider, maybe move it closer, and you can use the guidelines to keep yourself proportionate. And then the next thing we want to do is I want to be able to duplicate the sliders so that I can have 3 sliders, each beside each of the switches. And there are 2 ways you can do that. One way you can do it is just to use option. You click on this, use your option, and then just drag down. Or the other way to do is just you highlight the user interface you want to and then command D, and then it gives you, and then you can now move down and have it aligned. So after doing this, when you have three of these sliders all properly aligned side by side with the switches, the next thing we want to do right now is to create the outlet and the actions. The outlet is a digital representation of the user interface, right? The component of the user interface on the storyboard. So I just want to create a digital interface of this here, so and link both of them, right? And then after we've created the outlet, then the next thing is to create the action, which is what moves and makes animates the particular asset or user interface that you have created. So where you want to do, how you want to do that is to also come, notice where we put the former outlets, which were for the switches. That's the same place we want to do that. And the way is exactly the same. You control and drag, highlight a component here, and then give it the name. And the name we are giving this is the red slider. But the control, and then drag. Bring slider. Notice that you have action, out and out action. So you want to on the outlet because what we are creating at this moment. It's important to pay attention to your outlet and your action. Your outlet, like it presentation, like
Hmm.
has the issue that have the user interface do something. So
Yeah,
third,
all that was about was actually showing you how you create, like I mentioned, and I'm saying it for the untempt time because it's important, is that for every asset or for every user component, right? You could be creating an outlet which is representative of the property, and you'll be creating an action. So all we're doing here is literally just creating the outlets. It's IB outlet, right? So in doing that, right, I've created two outlets there. I'm going to create a third outlet. And as you create each of these, notice that what happens is there's a concentric circle, right, in the gutter somewhere here. These are concentric circles, right, that are created, all of this. When I go to the main code, because I'm running this over a video screen, when I go to the main code, when I click each of these concentric circles, they are going to whatever user components they are associated with would be highlighted. And I'm going to do that once we're done with these videos. I'll just run through some explanation of that.
would be this. You highlight, control, and drag to the point where you want to drop it. And then we call this the blue slider. And you drop. So 1, 2, 3 are the switches, 1, 2, 3 are the sliders. So now that we've created the outlet, the next thing will be create the actions, more or less the methods, right? The functions within the function that would help animate or drive the behavior of our sliders. So how you want to do that is you also use the control drag for each of them, but just watch, see what I'm going to do now. And where do we want to put it? Well, we could literally put this under. So this is one function. Remember, this was for the switch change. So let's put another function under it. And we start with command. Oh, sorry, highlight this command and drag. Now we commanded and we've clicked control and drag. Sorry, control and drag. So next thing you want to do is we want to call it something, right? Let's say slider changed because that's what we want to do when the slider changes. But you have to pay attention again. Remember what we are doing here is action. So make sure your connection is set to action. And then what else? The type you want to set it to UI slider, right? And then you can um, click connect, and that's you there. So that's what we have here. So what you want to do is you want to go ahead and connect the other sliders to this particular action. Now, unlike in the case of the outlets where you created 111, you know, representations of each of the sliders, you're using one action, right? In that case, creating all of sliders behaving in one specific type of way, and that's why you're using one action. So if we go ahead, for example, to try to create this, and I click Control Drag, what's happening is going to go create a second method, and that's not what you want. So what we're going to do here is literally go to this point and connect this to this. That's what, if you highlight this, you can see the ones that are connected, the red and the green. Third one, which is being connected. So you click here to and drag the blue, and all of a sudden the blue is connected. If you go here, all of it, you can see all three of them are connected. So right now, this method has nothing in it, right? So what we want to do is type in something, and what we're going to type in here is simply going to be update color. I am an update color. This is the form that does everything we want. All we are just trying to do is, by saying update color, is, remember we said the function update color, right? We are calling this function. In other words, this whole function is simply a call. This is a call to this function. In other words, it's almost like having all of these copied and pasted there. That's all it is. But then there's one more thing that we need to do. Notice that for the right, it's red switch is on. It's either on or off. All right. But what we want to do, remember, the slider graduates the color from, say, 0 to 1. Right. It's not 0, 1. The graduation from 0 to 0.01, 0.02, and all of that. You know the way the sliders work. So what you want to do here is to create color scheme. And how you do, just and type
Excuse me.
notes. So this is, I will copy this. Let me move this way. Okay. Command copy. So instead of 1, right, we want it to have a graduation scale. So that's what I have there, right? And what this is literally saying is, I want you to go pick the value of red scale. As you move this, you're getting the value of the red slider. In other words, red slider dot value, you're picking the value of the red slider. But the red scale dot value that you have here actually returns a value of the type float, which is like a decimal number, right? But for the specific purpose of colors, right, you don't use like your regular float. What you use is what you call a CG float, and that actually means core graphics float, right? It's a completely different type than your regular float. So to convert the double that the float that you have here, right, to CG float, that's why we have CG float in brackets red slider value, which is a float. So you're converting that float to CG float. Think of it like what you have, the color scale that you have from 0 to 255. For those of you that have done some colors, right, you're literally converting it to that kind of scale. So you do that for red, and let's do that for green too. Command V, and then we change this to green, and then we do the same thing for Command V, and we do the same thing for blue. Boom. And I think we are good. So we can now go ahead and test what we have done and see how well we did. Okay, successfully built. Turn this on. As we move the scale, the color goes through the scale. See what's going on? We do this, we go get the scale from end to end. We do this, we get the scale from end to end. So that's about all we have for this the app. We will be continuing again in the next video. I hope you are able.
Okay, so this is more of what we have going on here for this video. And just a minute. I'm not sure if there are any questions, but that's mostly what we are able to cover today. We're going to get back to continue next week, but let me see. I want to see if I can just run us through the code, because I'm looking for where I have the code. Run us through and just Xcode. Where is my Xcode? Please indulge me for a minute. Indulge me for a minute. I thought I had the code up and running. But yeah, I think I do. That's my simulator and that's my Xcode. So let's try to open this. I think it was closed. Yeah. So let me share my screen one more time. Let me share my screen one more time and just walk us through something on my screen. I don't know if you can see me. Nope. Windows. Okay. Stop presenting. Yeah, this is okay. I think you can see me probably now. So let me run, because this is what we just completed now, where we can run back and forth. So if I turned all of this on, I could literally get almost any kind of color combination based on what we've done. But in real summary, all we have done today is literally created the view. We've created some kind of viewer, right? And then we put some bounds around that viewer. And then we went ahead to start creating a switch. And notice the switch. There are 3 switches and there are 3 sliders. And one of the things we did was this. Because if you understand this, then you probably understand everything that you should about this, right? For each of them, so say for example, for this viewer that we have here, this is the property which literally connects it. So you see the concentric circle, when I highlight it, it just shows that there is a connection between this guy and this guy. And if this connection is broken for any reason, right, this would not work, right? Because you have a physical component, but it doesn't have a digital or behind the scene equivalent. Same thing for this. I highlight this, I highlight this, I highlight this, and I highlight this. For each of them, there's some kind of digital representation. And then think of your class. This is the beginning of the class, right? If I click this arrow, just pay attention and you see where it turns yellow, which is okay. That's way below. So this is a a class. That's the opening brace, and the ending brace is somewhere down here. That's the ending brace. So everything you have is inside that class. And in that class, you have properties first, which is the outlets, and then you have a bunch of functions, right? And it's arranged that way because the first time I got introduced to this, I was kind of confused because I would see um, the instructor, right, or folks or people doing this stuff, they would write a bunch of codes here. Then they will move up and they will write another set of lines of code. Then they will move this way, and I'm like, why are they alternating up and down? Is there a certain method to the madness? That is the method, right? You want to put your properties at the top, and then you put your functions below. And the functions, there's no specific order in which you want to put your functions, but you can put your functions in whatever order you want. All of these functions you created, this particular function automatically came with the class that was created. And I mentioned that this, so for the class you see here, right, this is like a super class. All these other classes like this is a subclass under this super class, right? And one of the things in classes is that a certain class can use, so if you have some properties in a super class, right, the subclasses, right, would have to adopt those properties. But in this case, you have this override function, and the idea of the override function is to override, to create a special exception, right, for that function to override those properties. And that's why, if you remember at some point, we did that color view is equals to background dot dot, where we change the color from white to black. And that's literally what this function is doing. All these other functions are functions that are connected to this and this, specifically because we wanted everything here to behave in a specific way. We created only one function for them, where you could create one function and then use an arrow to connect all the other functions, so you have one function. That does not mean that if you wanted different behavior for all of them, you couldn't create different functions. But in this specific case, all we wanted to do was create one function, and all three switches and all three sliders and switches respectively would operate with one function. So in this case, the switch changed, right? We used the word switch changed to say, hey, when I change this switch, in other words, when I toggle the switch from on to off, right, there is a call that is made to this function to execute whatever it has in it. That's it. And in this case, all we did was update color, where we're actually calling an existing function. What we have with update color is just a call. It's as simple as copying all of this and pasting it in here. Anywhere you see update color, you copy all of this. But remember, when we talked about functions, you don't have to replicate these things. You can just use a call, a line of code to call that function. So that's literally what's happening here. So this is for the switch. This is for the slider. And that's how we are able to get through this. So, like I mentioned, I already uploaded the videos. I don't know why it doesn't sound too clear. I would have to check whether it's something that has to do with the laptop I'm using, or that's actually how it sounds. If that's the case, you might just want to still try to use it, endure it for now. Yeah, if I really do discover there's a sound problem, I would have to get an actual recording system to re-record all of them. Like I mentioned to you, this is just a pilot, the first time we are starting this. So we haven't built collaterals to be able to do it as refined as you would want it to do. But as you can see, we're marching towards being able to create some finesse to what we do. So the other thing I like to mention, I've had about 2 persons reach out to me about things around exercises in Unit 3, things they really couldn't sort out and all of that. The truth is, the exercises, the way they are set up to have you work your brain, do some research to try to figure out what's going on. Oftentimes, when you have the answer somewhere, people don't just try to solve the problem. There is a quick default to the existing solutions. But notwithstanding, I think we would have to, especially when you have tried and you're still stuck, we might have to revisit some of the things we did in Unit 3. Like I mentioned to you, Unit 3 is literally the heart of the matter, because you see a lot of the coding that we're doing on this side is literally Unit 3. So my thesis would be, if there is some lack of understanding in any way in Unit 3, it needs to be addressed. So I would call on us, if you did anything in Unit 3 which wasn't clear to you, please document and try to send it to me, because what I'm going to do is work on mostly those areas that were difficult for people to figure out. I don't even necessarily have the answers anywhere, but I'm going to try to document that and then make them available either by video or we do something in class. But the whole idea is to make sure that you are able to, understand every single thing that you can. Even though, frankly, I can tell you in coding, there are a lot of things that would always look strange. Even if you're an experienced coder, there are things you're going to see and you have no idea what's going on. So web application development is an exploratory journey. So, and I say that to say that if you see something that's strange, don't get frustrated. Google it, ask. There are a lot of community groups online. You can always approach a lot of those or reach out to me. And like I always mention, I don't know half as much as what I think I should know. But if I don't have the answers, I would always reach out to a third party inside or outside of Apple. So that would be where I draw the line on my side. But if you have any questions you might want to ask, I'll be very happy to address them. You can, speak up, type something in the chat or anything between all of that. So I send out these weekly emails. In the weekly emails, there's something that looks like a syllabus or something, right? At the bottom of that PDF, right, is where you have the link to the YouTube channel. So once you go click that, you would get it. Notwithstanding, I'm still going to send out an email, but that's where you get the link to all of the videos. All of the videos for all of our classes are all up there. And the ones for these tutorials, I'm also uploading them in the same channel so that you can have access to them. And if videos are not your thing, the textbook Unit 4 also covers everything that we have done here today, and that will be available in the videos. The last thing will be, if anything I've done here doesn't work for you when you're trying to do it, please reach out to me. I'm happy to connect with you on MS Team and walk you through the process. So any questions? Any questions? So if there are no questions, we're going to draw the line here, and then next week we are going to continue with this app, finish it. My hope is that at the end of this class, everybody will be able to develop this exact app and possibly modify it into something. Okay, no questions. Thank you, Robin. So I appreciate you all, and thank you for spending the evening, trying to, develop skills around iOS app development. Have a blessed evening and hope to see you on Tuesday. Bye.